All right. Welcome, everybody. It is 6 o'clock on December 11th. Sorry we missed you guys last week. We did have to postpone and move on to this week as we're getting closer to Christmas and all kinds of fun stuff going on. So, thanks again for being part of this. We, again, are sharing for educational purposes only. We are not advising or instructing you to do anything specific. This is just for education as we move through some of the interesting things that we have come across. I have Karen with me. I am Tara. We are part of Empowered Learning USA. And we are happy to share this information with you guys. This particular podcast, our final podcast on the private trust conversation, where we round out the last piece of the Hague Convention document that we've been reviewing for the last couple weeks. There's just a short section to review, and then we're going to go into some discussion more on actual just trusts and some specifics on the trust that you usually don't find when you're trying to do one on your own, or if you're asking somebody to do one for you. We're going to have some discussion on things that are not common topic when you're learning. So we'll jump right in. Here's two, if you don't mind. After 5 final clauses, Article 26.
Okay, Article 26. Any state may, at the time of signature, ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession, or at the time of making a declaration in terms of Article 29, make the reservations provided for in Article 16, 21, and 22. No other reservations shall be permitted. Any contracting state may at any time withdraw a reservation which it has made. The reservation shall cease to have effect on the first day of the third calendar month after notification of the withdrawal.
Okay. What?
Right. So before I go on to the next one, what that tells me is that any party can withdraw from the treaty, right? And if a trust is a treaty, then any party can actually withdraw from it. So what this is telling me is if I create a trust and I have parties sign it, any one of those parties can cease to be a party to which they can withdraw. So it doesn't have to be worded exactly like this. This is just telling you that people can. So something to consider in your own trust documents is, what would that look like? Are you putting date restrictions on somebody withdrawing from the trust? When can they do it? How frequently can they do it? What does that look like? Okay, moving on to Article 27. Pardon me. The convention shall be open for signature by the states which were members of the Hague Conference on Private International Law at the time of its 15th session. It shall be ratified, accepted, or approved, and the instruments of ratification, acceptance, or approval shall be deposited with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So this is just stating that once it's been accepted and all parties have signed it, where is it going to be, when, what day first, and then where is it going to be stored after that? Where can we find it if we need to go looking for it? And so that's really what Article 27 is about. So in your trust documents, if you do one, you're going to want to make sure, where is it going to be housed? Is it going to be housed where we signed it? Is it going to be housed off-site? If it's going to be housed off-site, how is anybody going to know where it is and where to find it at a later date? So those are some things to take into consideration.
Right. And we have done that in multiple, right? We have a digital copy, we have a physical copy, and some people may keep it in a safe. Even powers of attorney, we've got different family members that have copies of those type of things as well. So yeah, just really think through what makes the most sense, especially if something were to happen, like a fire, God forbid, something to happen, yet you have more than one copy for somebody to have access to, for sure.
Correct.
All righty. So we've got Article 28. Any other state may accede to the convention after it has entered into force in accordance with Article 30, paragraph 1. The instrument of accession shall be deposited with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. This accession shall have effect only as regards the relations between the acceding state and those contracting states which have not raised an objection to its accession in the 12 months after the receipt of the notification referred to in Article 32. Such an objection may also be raised by member states at the time when they ratify, accept, or approve the convention after an accession. Any such objection shall be notified to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
What do you think it means when they say ratify?
Approved?
Okay.
Well, they say approve it. So, I mean, ratify, accept, approve, they all mean the same thing as in general, correct?
Yeah, in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that we covered that, right? Just wanted to
Right.
make sure.
Anything else there that we need to point out in 28?
Well, I like that they put in there such an objection may be raised, right? So if somebody comes to me and says, here's a trust, do you want to be a party to it? And I read it and I have an objection to it, this is telling me that I can object to it, right? If that's even reasonable. Some people I know have actually put in their trust documents. If anybody disagrees with this, they are not a party to the trust anymore, and they have admitted and accepted that they'll have no rights to any trust assets or use. So it depends on how you actually want to phrase that. Can you raise an objection? Are you allowing people to raise an objection? Are the parties just signing it saying that nothing brought against this will stand? How do you want to word that in your own document? And it's important for us to all have those conversations. What does that look like?
Yep, absolutely. Alrighty, we're on to Article 29. If a state has 2 or more territorial units in which different systems of law are applicable, it may, at the time of signature, ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession, declare this convention shall extend to all of its territories or only to one or more of them, and may modify this declaration by submitting another declaration at any time. Any such declaration shall be notified to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and shall state expressly the territorial units to which the convention applies. If a state makes no declaration under this article, the convention is to extend to all territorial units of that state.
So what do you think it means when they say one or more of them may modify this declaration? Who do you think they're talking about?
So we're talking about the convention shall extend all of its territorial units or only to one or more of them and may modify this declaration by submitting. So I'm not sure.
So, okay, so I'm thinking kind of outside the box, right? If a state has 2 or more territorial units in which different systems of law are applicable, what might that look like?
Go for it.
Okay, so to me, that tells me that I might have a trust that's operating in the private, but the trust houses an LLC, which is governed by commerce, right? So it's 2 different systems of law, and both are applicable. One is private, right? Because the trust then holds the LLC underneath it, and the LLC is then governed by a different set of laws, which are the corporate structure. Okay, so that's what this is telling me. Okay, so at the time of signature, ratification, acceptance, approval, or ascension, declare that this convention shall extend to all of its territory units. Okay, so the trust is extending to the LLC. Okay, for the protection. Okay, I get it. And units or any to one more of them and may modify this declaration. So the LLC can say, hey, wait a minute, this trust provision doesn't work for me, so we need to modify this component of it, right? That's what it's saying to me. So it's like, okay, so then it goes into the next paragraph. How can it be modified, right? So a lot of people think a trust can never be changed. Well, that's not actually correct. Trust can be changed. It's a matter of how are they changed. So let's say that I started a trust 20 years ago. And as I'm aging, some things have changed. Does that mean that I need to create a new trust and nullify the one I made 20 years ago? No, that's not what that means. That means that I need to have a process for how am I going to update that trust that I wrote 20 years ago to reflect the current business or the current structure going forward. So
And you're referencing irrevocable, because a lot of people think that irrevocable you can't change because of the term.
I'm thinking both, right? Yeah. Any can be, right? But specifically the irrevocable, yes, it can be changed. But who can change it? That's the kicker. The revocable, who can change that? Pretty dang near anybody can change that. So just because we've titled it irrevocable does not mean it cannot be changed. Yes, it can be, but there's definitely a proper process to do that. And that's exactly what Article 29 to me is talking about. Yes, you can change it. We need to be able to lay out the ground rules for doing that, which is the example that they've given us for that.
So a good translation from territorial in the Hague Convention document would be entities under your trust.
Correct.
Okay. I'll let you, because I think there's only 3 left. Why don't you go ahead and take 30?
Okay, Article 30. Pardon me. Still a little bit hazy from what's going on in the community. The convention shall enter into force on the first day of the third calendar month after the deposit of the third instrument of ratification, acceptance, or approval referred to in Article 27. Good Lord. Okay. Therefore, the convention shall enter into force. A, for each state ratifying, accepting, or approving it subsequently on the first day of the third calendar month after the deposit of its instrument of ratification, acceptance, or approval. B, for each acceding state on the first day of the third calendar month after the expiry of the period referred to in Article 28. C, for a territorial unit to which the convention has been extended in conformity with Article 29 on the first day of the third calendar month after the notification rendered to in that article. Okay, so this really to me is more of the preceding articles where they're talking about the timeline.
Yep, okay. Pretty straightforward. All right. This is the last of it. Alrighty, so Article 31. Any contracting state may denounce this convention by a formal notification in writing addressed to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Hague on the first day of the month following the expiration of 6 months after the notification is received by the depositary or on such later date as is specified in the notification. So that's basically your cancellation, right? Like if anything has to be canceled, you have notification, trust minutes, like you said before, the authority who's stating all the rules and what we're doing on this trust.
Nice.
All righty. So Article 32. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands shall notify the states members of the conference and the states which have acceded in accordance with Article 28 of the following: the signatures and ratifications, acceptances, or approvals referred to in Article 27, the date on which the convention enters into force in accordance with Article 30, the accessions and the objections raised to accessions referred to in Article 28, the extensions referred to in Article 29, the declarations referred to in Article 20, the reservation or withdrawals referred to in Article 26, and the denunciations referred to in Article 31. So we are not going to go back and forth on these because you all are more than capable to pull this document off of our website and reference each one of those articles. And if you have questions, you know how to reach us. So
great. Okay, let's read the last 2 paragraphs. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Oh, in witness thereof, the undersigned being duly authorized thereto, have signed the convention done at the Hague on the first day of July, 1985, in English and French, both texts being equally authentic, in a single copy, which shall be deposited in the archives of the government of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and of which a certified copy shall be sent through diplomatic channels to each of the state members of the Hague Conference on Private International Law at the date of this 15th session. Now, that to me, that last paragraph and that one sentence above it is equal to a notary jurat, right? That's
Yep.
what that is. These people before me have signed this document of their free will, and me, a notary, has the court authority to authenticate this document, and therefore that's what I'm doing. So that is super important on your trust documents, that they be notarized, in my opinion. Other people may think not, but in my opinion, because your trust is a legal document, it should have that notary jurat on there. Now, a notary authentication, a notary signature block is completely different than a notary jurat. Completely different. So if you don't know what those are, I'm sure we'll have a training on it.
Yes. That will be in our trust course. Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. So again, that document is on the website, empoweredlearningusa.com. Under our resources for documents, you can get that for free. Feel free to download that and share it. So I think we've got, some really interesting questions we can pull to kind of start talking about, what are you going to need to use your trust for? What should you be using your trust for? What are some of the nuances of, what we've seen, especially with maybe some language that can be confusing with trust, some things that people are teaching out there. It's not that people are teaching wrong. It's that you need to understand the different lanes that each thing belongs in, because if you're taking a trust and you're trying to open up a bank account and you're talking about what we're talking about with a private trust, and then you're trying to open a public bank account, we've got a lot of crossover going on there. So we're going to talk through some of that stuff and what that means, because you can't just go and create things and go willy-nilly and do what you think you know is best, because that's what's gotten us here in the first place. The stuff we've been taught on how to do it is exactly what we shouldn't be doing. So it's kind of go back. That's why we're trying to teach this out to everybody, is go back and start thinking differently and start thinking about why it would be an issue to take a private trust and open a bank account. So, we'll talk through some of that in the course. We'll talk about, funding, assets, all of that kind of thing, and what you do with that, and why private looks so much different than a public trust. So let's start off by go ahead, Karen.
Nope, I was going to say,
Okay.
What's the first question we've got, or do we have any?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about some of the needs for a trust, right? We talked about last time, it's protection, right? And we talked about you can utilize an LLC under a trust as an overarching umbrella. Let's talk a little bit about that hierarchy, right? The purpose and the reasoning behind it, and why you don't want to load all your stuff into one trust. Because my family, that's what they did, right? Public trust, here's all my stuff. You go have fun with it. I'm done. So why is that not ideal when it comes to a private trust?
Okay, so this is just my take on it. And so when it comes to a private trust, if you have all your assets in one trust, then let's say you've got a trust protector who's not very good, or they're just learning, okay, or they're negligent in their duties because they're learning and they just don't really understand. Then by having all your assets in one trust, if the trust gets breached, all of those assets are now open for disclosure, which is not the intended purpose of a trust. A trust is to actually protect those assets, right? So we hear the term diversify all the time, but we don't really know what it means. So people think, well, okay, I've diversified my assets. I've got a little bit of silver over here. I've got a little bit of gold over there. Maybe I've got a retirement account. Maybe I've got something in the stock market, right? They think that diversification is that. And that can absolutely be one way to look at your portfolio. But let's look at diversification as multiple trusts. Like, let's look at trust A has one car, my husband's. Trust B has my car. Trust C has maybe a motorcycle in it, or Trust D has a motorhome in it. Then what you've done is, if in any one of those are involved in an accident, then you have one asset and one trust that has to be defended. You don't have all of your assets in one trust, and now you're trying to defend your entire livelihood. So it really, to me, is important to have one trust that I can have one item in. Now, let's talk about, let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm a car dealer and I've got 50 different cars. Then I might have trust A that has the overarching, holds every single classic car that I own. But under that, I have trust A1, and that has one car. And then under that, I have trust B1. And then under that, I have a car. And then under C1, I have another car. That overarching trust protects all those sub trusts, and each one of those cars has its own. So there's a wide array of how we can structure this. And really, we're only limited by how small of a box we want to think outside of.
Right. And so I've noticed, there's a lot of people out there, teaching the EINs and how, you get all of these things. You've got an express trust and you've got a foreign trust and you've got all these different types of trusts. The trusts you're talking about, do they all need EINs?
No, they're private.
Yep.
They don't need it.
Yep.
And if you have an EIN, you now have a contract with the IRS to which you have to do tax reporting on. And if your trust is only housing an item, why do you need to pay tax on that? It's not generating any income and it's not doing any business. So why would you want an EIN for it? You don't need it. You don't need it.
And that goes to another, question we've had in the past as well. What does it mean when somebody references a business trust versus a private trust?
Oh my gosh, this is like what there's this oh my gosh, there was this phrase that I used to hear and it would drive me crazy because they zeroed each other out, and now I'm at a loss. I can't think of it. A business trust, that negates each other. You can have a business, absolutely. You can have a trust, absolutely. Your trust can house your business, absolutely. Your business normally does not house a trust. Okay, fine. But your business is in commerce and your trust isn't. So how do you have a business trust? That doesn't even work, right? So
like a jumbo shrimp.
right. Like, oh my goodness. So there is no such thing as a business trust. There just is not. However, you can have a trust hold and house your business, your LLC. Absolutely. Yes, you can do that. Would your trust have an EIN? No. Would your LLC have an EIN? Yes, they need to. They're registered. They're a corporate entity engaging in commerce. They would need to. But the trust housing the business would not need one.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see. Okay, so I know we've talked about before kind of the best ways to get started and getting your documents, but really it is the education piece. So it is it doesn't hurt to actually it's super beneficial in my opinion to learn how to do books, read what's one of the books we had, the 0% book, people's how to do a trust. We got the Weiss trust on our website as well. It's like anything else you learn, right? Like learn both sides of it so that you understand when a word or something comes up and it seems like it's contradictory, you've got to figure out what lane that conversation is in. And that's really everything that we talk about at Empowered Learning is you've got to understand there's one toe in one direction, which is public, one toe in one direction that's private. Most of them will go back and forth. You really very rarely land in all on one side or the other. I mean, we all landed in public for a really long time, but we're learning how to step out of that is the whole purpose of all of this. But it has been really interesting just in the education piece. You will learn a lot more on how to do it wrong. And I don't mean by trial and error doing it wrong. I mean by reading the public version and then go read what's private, and you start to see the stark contrast between what's protected, who's protecting it, who's got control, all of those things. So really do your due diligence on just reading through public and private trusts.
Well, and one of the best educational videos I ever watched on what not to do with a trust was the movie called The Laundromat.
Oh,
Oh my
yes.
God. It was hilarious. And how not to protect it, and then the ad libbing in it with the comedic spin on it. Well, we don't really recommend that, but you could do it in this scenario. And then really watching how manipulative people could be with their trust,
Yeah.
and knowing that's not the honor and the integrity I want to operate in. And then the spin with the dad and the daughter at the very end, and just going, oh my gosh, he's so protected everything. And her little greediness without asking questions really got the better of her.
Yeah.
Right. And so watching that really showed me both sides of it, right? How important it is to protect it, and what to do properly and rightfully with integrity. And then what the slime balls have been doing that we were just consciously unaware of, because we have this ingrained, well, they're operating in honor, and they were using that to their advantage to do sneaky stuff. That video was really eye-opening for me to watch it. And yet it did it with a sense of humor without leaving me going, oh, I'm the worst.
Yeah.
No, right? Like the last thing we want to do is watch a video, walk away feeling ashamed. I did not. It was hilarious.
And what was funny about that is it was on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on Netflix, and it's got Antonio Banderas in it. Like, there's well-known actors in this movie, and like you were like, "You've got to watch this." I'm like, "I've never even heard of it. Like, what are you talking about?" So,
Yeah.
but it was extremely entertaining. But that brings up a good point too of you when you're going through the education. Man, this stuff has been in our face for a while. We just have to recognize it. So when you see, we highly recommend you go watch that movie, because you should be able to walk away from that and go, wait a minute, hold on a second, what just happened here? Because if you haven't been part of family drama when it comes to a trust or somebody passing away, you will, because it does not escape any family. I don't care how big or small you are. And it doesn't matter how much the person that passed away tried to prep or plan or prepare, because they do not ever hit everything. And people, and especially in families, get very interesting when that topic comes up. That's all I'm going to say. So I guess.
So let's talk about a couple things. We talk about trust, and we talked about the literature and some of the funny video that we can watch that we can learn from. So we hear things like a hold harmless agreement. Who is that really between? Is that between me and the vendor that I'm trying to do business with?
No, that's between you and your trustee, right? No?
No. Who's the hold harmless between? Think about how you wrote it, right? Think about
it's been so long.
It has been, right? But we have to think about these, because who's holding who harmless, right? I suppose it could be your trustee, because it really is the person that is going to be operating your government entity, right? So typically when you wrote your hold harmless, I'm assuming, because this is what I did, and I think most people have done this, they write a hold harmless between the all caps government entity. Some people call that their enlegis. Some people call that their straw man. Okay. It's between that all caps government entity and me, the individual operating that all caps entity. That's who is between the hold harmless. Why is that important?
Because one is acting as a representative of the other.
Correct. And so should I ever give that out to the public?
No.
So who is actually holding who harmless?
The creator, all caps, is holding the living agent person harmless.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So when people are talking about, hey, My bank needs a hold harmless agreement. Is the bank talking about a hold harmless agreement between the bank and me?
No, they're talking about it between your entity and you.
That's correct, because the bank wants to make sure that my all caps government entity is not going to hold me responsible for any harms done on its behalf, right? So, as we're creating these documents, we really need to think about who is gaining what from the document, right? There's another one called a trust certificate. And I'm not going in any particular order, I'm just off the top of my head pulling these out. So, what is the significance of a trust certificate? What does it do?
The trust certificate, I'm trying to remember the difference between the declaration and the certificate off the top of my head. Because it is one of them is the instructions. The declaration is the instruction. I forget which one is which.
The instruction of what? So if the trust declaration is an instruction, what is it instructing?
It's instructing the rules of the trust.
Correct. And the parties, right? And when
correct.
it becomes effective and all those kinds of things we just talked about in the Hague. Okay,
Yep.
so that's the trust declaration. But I'm talking about a trust certificate. What is that? Why do we need one?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Oh, Sarah.
Are you kidding? Do you know how many things have been rolling through my brain in the last 2 years since I've written my trust?
Okay, so the trust certificate is the document that's created whenever an asset is put into the trust. That's the certificate, right? So let's say you are my trustee, okay? ABC Trust, and you're my trustee. And I just went out as the beneficiary and bought what could I buy? A firewood log splitter, okay? And I come to you and I'm like, okay, I just bought a firewood log splitter and I need this to go into my trust to be an asset. And you're like, well, okay, give me all the receipts, give me everything so that I know what you purchased and what the value is. And I say, okay, I'm going to give it to the trust. You then, as the trustee, create the trust certificate saying that this asset has now been deposited into the trust as the assets. And then I'm given back a certificate showing that I have equitable interest in the item. I can use it, but these are my shares of the trust of the property that's in it, right?
Sorry, my brain went to a document, not the actual certificate, so it just went way over my head.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to think of the secondary document we had in there, not the actual like TCU.
Oh, okay. Yes, trust certificate unit is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Okay. So what kind of things would need a TCU?
Any asset that's in the trust, because if you have more than one beneficiary, you have to structure how those shares are going to be divvied out.
That's correct. And as more assets are brought in, do the TCUs get redistributed as more assets get brought in?
They can, if that's how it's decided upon.
And what happens when a beneficiary dies? What happens to the DCUs?
They go back into, oh gosh, let's see. They get redistributed evenly with the remaining beneficiaries if it's written that way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It all goes back to the trust declaration. What does the trust declaration say? If there's two beneficiaries and one dies, all the trust certificates, if it's written this way, then get gathered up, get brought back into the trustee. They all get looked at, they all get zeroed out, and then new trust certificates get issued out. Does a trust certificate transfer? So let's say you've got a husband and wife and one passes away. Do the trust certificates automatically go to the surviving spouse? Not
Nope.
automatically.
Nothing is automatic in a trust at all. It's not like that's the whole reason it's private, right? Is that you can dictate all those rules. When it's public and you don't have a lot of detail in there and somebody writes it for you, right? That just says, oh, if this happens, this happens. That's why doing it as private, you dictate all these little decisions that happen. So yeah, there's no automatics.
No automatics.
That's kind of the whole point of going through, that Hague.
Yeah, exactly. And
it.
then not just reading it, but then putting it into practical application, right? I'm seeing a lot of people taking their trust document, their EIN for their trust, and some of these people have 98 EINs, foreign trust, right? As recognized by the IRS, foreign, okay? And they are trying to get a foreign trust bank account with their foreign trust. And where might they run into issues with that?
Oh goodness. Yeah, you're talking offshore accounts. So you need to go back and watch The Laundromat.
Right?
Yeah,
because exactly what it is. Because any money that you put into that foreign 98 trust, you have just exported out of America into foreign territory.
Yep, wherever it was created.
So you have now just, I don't know, laundered money. I don't know. Like, that's a whole arena I have stayed out of.
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier about just because and that's a great point. Just because it's a foreign EIN or you create that foreign entity, you are not exempt from the rules of any type of entity through the US government, through any type of tax form. Again, EIN is attached to that. Yeah, there's a different form you fill out, but it just has a different letter behind it that says that you're not, US citizen material, you're foreign material. So if you go on the IRS website, you can find every mirrored document that just applies to foreign versus US. So it doesn't take you out of any jurisdiction, but yeah, the rules can get tricky because if you don't know exactly what you're doing, it can easily be deemed as nefarious activity because you're trying to sidestep something, and the government does not like that.
Okay, so let's talk about this. What's the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance?
Tax evasion is doing something illegally. That's basically saying I owe taxes. I know I owe taxes, but I'm going to try and skirt the system. Tax avoidance, if you know the tax codes and you know tax rules and you know what you're supposed to be doing, just because someone tells you, like a CPA or an H&R Block or whatever, just because they tell you this is how they normally do it does not mean it's the only way that exists. So when you're doing things privately and you're looking through these documents, one, the IRS provides instructions with every single one of their documents, and I bet you nobody reads through them because it's like, okay, I just need the mailing address. Where do I send it to? But those instructions really tell you what you can and cannot do, and you use the IRS's rules to your advantage when you know what those rules are. So to me, that's how I would explain avoidance is I'm not just giving it up and volunteering and here you go, but I'm certainly not trying to deceive anybody and get out of anything. I'm just trying to make sense of what I'm supposed to be doing with what I have. And there's more than one rule in there. There's how many tax codes? I mean, good Lord. I get why people don't want to read it. CPAs don't even want to read it, but that's the problem with the world we live in is everybody's trying to take the easy route. And when we have dummied down our education and we've dummied down even down to our handwriting, for God's sakes, we do everything that's easy and we have done it all to our own detriment.
I agree. So I heard this great phrase not too long ago. And the individual actually said, the last in line pays the tax. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. Why am I last in line? Oh, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
I'm to step out of line.
I'm not only getting out of line, but it reminded me of the game Hot Potato, right? Where you're in a circle and everybody's tossing it over. I'm like, oh no, why am I the only one that got stuck with the hot potato? Like,
yeah.
So I am actually trying to learn how do I pass that hot potato on to the next person, right? And in order to pass that hot potato on to the next person, I have to do my due diligence to do my tax reporting to pass that tax on to the next person. So let's think about this. We get the dealership, the manufacturer that made the car. They owe a tax for the manufacturing, but they give the car to the dealership, and the dealership doesn't want to take tax responsibility for that new car that they have on their lot. So what they do is they put it up for sale, and then they charge the new car owner for the tax on that car. Well, why isn't the car owner then saying, hey, wait a minute, I applied for an application, you pulled my credit, so therefore you already got paid. Why am I having to pay you twice? And why doesn't the new car owner do the tax reporting on that automobile and kick that tax back to the dealership? Right? Because ideally that's where it would be going, right? And then if the dealership didn't want to pay the tax, they'd have to kick it back to the manufacturer, right? So we have not done our due diligence. We think that when we get the car, I owe the tax, so I'm just going to pay it. Well, that's not the case. And then, so I'm learning how not to be the last in line, right?
Right.
It is a steep learning curve for me, and I've got an accounting background. So it really is, what do I know? What do I think I know? Set all of that aside, and then how do I have a new perspective on this? And it's a learning curve. The other thing that I'm trying to really wrap my head around as I'm reading this new book called The Psychology of Money. You heard of it?
Yep.
Have you read it?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I had never read this before. And I was like, okay, so I've talked to a lot of people about their education and belief around money, right? Mm-hmm. And this book is actually talking about how you need people 20 years outside of your circle of influence. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but 20 years outside of my circumference, a lot of those people are dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, well, okay, so I'm not getting that input. And I certainly don't want the 20 to 30 year younger version of their interpretation of how money works. Like that's not working either. So I'm like, okay, well, here's what, and I'm new into this book, chapter 1 or whatever, but here's what stood out to me. Somebody had interviewed John F. Kennedy before he became president. And they asked him, what kind of influence did you have during the Great Depression? And his answer is what stood out to me. What he said was, I have no direct experience. And I thought, how the hell do you have no experience? So I'm reading more. And he goes in and he said, look, we had great health, we had great traveling, we had great homes. Okay. He said, the only true experience I had with it was seeing my father hire more gardeners so that they had money to put food on the table. So his perspective when it came to money was so distorted that he couldn't really relate. Well, it turns out he got elected because he was a World War II veteran and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Right.
But as I'm looking around in my community and I'm like, well, okay, who is trying to look at money different? Who is trying to address money different? Who is that 20, 30 year age gap of people that I could talk to about the difference? Because we're talking the Great Depression, 20 years. We're talking the roaring economy, 20 years. Neither one of those have I lived through. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm like, okay, so where's that circle of influence? So we as a community of our peers have really got to start challenging just our own beliefs when it comes to money, trust, diversity, protection, assets. Like, do I want an LLC? Do I not? Do I know that my government entity is my business corporate entity? Like, am I even running it as a business, right? We have to challenge all this stuff. And I'm learning that, at least in my generation, this isn't a topic we ever talked about, ever.
Right. And it's interesting because in the financial planning world, there's two things that they look at in reference to that along that same topic. And there's some software products out, and one is how do you feel about risk, right? So, um, risk is tied to your emotion of money, right? Like, how did you grow up? Were you a saver? Were you a spender? Were you taught, how to do certain things? I mean, I remember my grandfather saying, he was one of, gosh, what was there? Seven kids. Um, one of seven kids. He dropped out of school in the sixth grade, taught himself, how to read the stock market. He said he listened to brokers when he was young and did the opposite of everything they said, and was successful at buying like apartment complexes, whatnot. Everything he did was self-taught. And by the time he passed, he had just shy of $750,000 in his estate because he took the time to learn what everyone around him was doing that he didn't get to experience because his family was so far in the poverty thinking that they never could dig themselves out. And that's his, emotional experience was, I don't want to do that, right? Like if that was
Mhm.
their choice and I want to do something totally different. So it's interesting. I did a software once where it scanned my eyes and my facial expressions when I was asked questions about money.
Oh, wow.
Super interesting, like the way they came back, and that's how they help you, plan. So it's that same thing, right? Is like we don't have to keep relying on everybody else, but do your due diligence of talking to your neighbors. You don't have to talk about like, hey, how much do you make? How much wealth do you have? It's like, hey, did you ever experience this? Like, I don't know, it's interesting the times we live in, like how people view, we hear some people in the world, oh, the inflation's not that bad. And there's some of us going, are you kidding? Like, I've had conversations with my daughter. Mom, it was so much easier when you were younger. Things were cheaper. And I go, yeah, and I didn't make nearly as much as I did then either. So, like, their concept is totally, especially like my kids, 18 to 25, their concept of money is so far off because all they know is super expensive right now.
Yeah. And the self-hatred that people have for themselves, right? I heard, and I don't know that this particular woman hates herself, but I could hear the disgust in her as she was describing this of herself. She said that, you know, look, you're intelligent and you get this, and this specific arena is difficult for you. And we were talking about a very specific siloed issue that I'm trying to learn my way through and become educated through. And she said, look, if you're having a difficult time getting through that, I've got a middle school education. How am I ever going to learn it if you can't get through it? And I thought, well, okay, first of all, you got to rebuke that, because just because I'm smart now in a whole bunch of different arenas doesn't mean that they weren't difficult when I started stretching my brain. It just means I refused to give up and kept going,
Yep.
right? So rebuking that for her is really what I want for her. And at the same time, if it's this difficult for some of us that have been on this journey for a long time, people that have struggled with their educational level, thinking that how am I ever going to get that just informationally, right? How am I ever going to understand that if I've been struggling for 40 years and I only have a middle school education? Right. So we really, and that's what I love about empowered learning, is that we really make this accessible to anyone, any educational level, any financial structure that they're restricted within. This whole thing is really affordable to anyone, and it's really common language.
Yep.
This it's not so professional or elusive that we're not talking about specific real life circumstances that anybody can get. And for that, I'm really grateful.
Absolutely. And I think that's, it's like anything, right? If you're Bible based and that's how you do things, what's the number one thing, right? One day at a time. If you're going through grief, it's one day at a time. If you're learning stuff, it's one day at a time. And nobody can, you know, eat the whole elephant in one sitting, right? Like you hear that, but it's hard to imagine yourself. I mean, 2 years ago, I would have never thought I was sitting here having the conversations I'm having today. So you can't look at it in the long-term sense, right? You have to look at it in tomorrow, I just need to know more than I did today, right? Whether
Right.
that's small, big, whatever. There's some days I can sit down for 8 hours. There's some days I got one. So, you know, and that's the thing. But I get, people are starving for getting away from how they're feeling right now or how they're living right now or how they're, if you've jumped on this train and you know enough to be frustrated with the world around you. I've watched people go through gosh, I really wish I didn't even know this stuff because now I'm more frustrated that I see it happening in every corner
Correct.
that I'm turning in. But the beautiful part is just like anything else. You can't change the world around you, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. You can only change, your immediate space around you, and you're in charge of yourself. So having the ability to just everybody has the ability to learn.
Yeah.
And it might look different for everybody, but there is a way. I mean, we've got kids coming into this stuff and just listening and paying attention, and it might take them 5-6 years to hear it again and see it in a different spot and live life a little bit and figure it out. But the exposure is super important, and that's why we're trying to do what we're doing, is just get the exposure. I had a great conversation with somebody who just simply asked me, like, what's with the plate on your car? So, just things like that, just striking up that conversation. I know you've had a bunch of them just standing in the post office line. So, it's just having those conversations with people. We need to go back to being open to talking to the people around us and not building fences and staying inside and, just staying out of society. We need to get back to the world where, we shared with everybody else's best interest was above our own. So,
Mhm.
that's really what we're trying to accomplish.
I heard a great motivator say the other day they were frustrated that the world isn't changing at the expedited speed that they would like it to see. And
Amen.
we just kind of step back and go, amen, man. Like, we are not changing fast enough. But what caught me was he said, if you only took 18 minutes every day, 18 minutes, that's all you did, then in 1 year, you would have spent 6,300 minutes, right, in changing your life. Most people won't even commit to 100 minutes, and you will have done 6,300,
Yep.
right? And neither you or I got here by doing 18 minutes every day. We poured in hours, countless hours, right?
Yep.
And we are further than some people that have been on this journey for 20 years, which is
Right.
frightening to me, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be where they are in 20 years and I'm further in fewer, right?
Right.
But we have literally made this a full-time job for the two of us. And I don't mean empowered learning. I mean our education and
Yes.
our experience and the
Correct.
stuff we've done and the stuff we've gone, oh God, wouldn't do that again, that we're
Yep.
not teaching anybody, just so
Right.
you know. And then the stuff that we've done that we've gone, okay, this worked. So, okay, let's share this and how can we do it? But we clearly spent more than 18 minutes every day. And if that 18 minutes was after dinner, turn the TV off and just pick up a book and read for 18 minutes, that will at least get you on your way,
Right.
right? And we really want to encourage you to do that, right?
Yeah.
Take that opportunity, take that power, and to just be like, okay, yes, I'm going to commit to making my life better now, even if it's just through my education and I'm not taking any other action until I
Yep.
understand it better.
Yeah. I did that pretty much the first year. I mean, I was like reading so much that my jaw was on the ground from what I was reading. I couldn't even think about doing an action. I was just like, beside myself, understanding what was going on and what was being said. And it was like, oh wow. And I think that's what's so hard about watching people just learn it and then try to jump in and do. And to me, that's way more frustrating and will stop you quicker than if you took the time to do your education, because really the reason we're pushing this education so much is it's such an easier path to other things. So much easier than trying to bang your head against a wall, get so frustrated, throw your hands in the air. I don't do well with this, right? Like that roller coaster of, oh my gosh, this is possible. Oh crap, I can't get anywhere. Oh my gosh, this is possible. Oh crap, I can't get anywhere. I mean, you have to do a little bit of that, the trial and error stuff, but it shouldn't be your only way of getting through this information.
Mhm.
It's like, so I liken it to when somebody asks me, oh gosh, I want to know what you know, or I want to have what you've gotten accomplished or whatever. And I say, okay, I'm going to tell you the same thing like I would tell somebody if I'm taking them to church. I'm not going to teach you the Bible. I'm not going to tell you who to listen to, and I'm not going to tell you what to do the other 6 days of the week. I'm going to expose you to what I've gained enlightenment or information out of, and I'm going to encourage you to stay in it and participate. I can't do anything else. It's your journey, it's your path, it's your learning. And I will tell you right off the bat, don't walk into a church and lean on the one guy talking. Hear him, hear other people, take it as a grain of salt. And that's really how we should be approaching all of this is we're here to expose people to some education they may not have known existed. But to go out and try to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow it's not where anybody's going to be. So that's, it's really, really understanding the authority you have and where you can utilize it, because there's authority that needs to happen on public and private. It just depends on what lane you choose to get into. I mean, it's like going to school all over again, right? Pick your classes for high school. Oh crap. You know, like which I don't know what direction I want to go. I'm still exploring things. So, I mean, how many times have we pivoted, Karen, in almost 2 years? We've pivoted so many times, come back to things, learned new things, put something on a shelf for a while, pulled it back off the shelf for a while. I mean, it's just what you have to do. But we're so excited about what we're learning that we have a passion for not only feeding ourselves, but for, experiencing that with others around us. Because if that's how we're feeling as we're going through this, we want other people to share that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's safety in numbers, right? So protect your assets, protect your neighbor, and let's move forward and create the world we really want.
Yep. So I think I'm going to make a decision on the spot right here and clue you into it right now. So
Okay, great.
we are going to pause on our podcast till the beginning of the year. I want to finalize our trust course in December, since I've kind of promised that on the website that's going to be coming. So we will resume again on January 1st, if that still works for you, Karen.
Yep, works for me.
And we will kick off the new year with some exciting stuff, dive into some new stuff, get through we got through some of the dry stuff with the trust, but now I know I've had a lot of people asking me about getting into starting a trust. And it's one of those things that everybody thinks is just so overwhelming, but just it took me months to put mine together, but I just started getting documents and reading and doing. So that's what we hope to really, get you guys started with the course. I'm not going to create a course that gives you everything all in one bucket. It's going to start you out with bite-sized things that you can do, and it's not ridiculously overwhelming, and it'll get you to the end goal quicker. And we'll do that in a couple different modules, but otherwise we will resume with you guys again on December 1st, Wednesday night at 6 p.m.
January 1st.
I thought I said January.
December. It's all good.
Oh, did I? Oh my gosh. See, I'm not getting out of this year whether I want to or not, right? Yeah, no, you're right. I did say December. January 1st.
Good.
I'm not waiting that long.
It's good.
Well, thanks again. Thank you, Karen, for being part of it. And we will see you guys in a few weeks.